He told me I was too fat and too stupid to keep him interested, while he was busy giving private extra credit to his 19-year-old student in his bedroom. We've all been not enough for someone who was actually just busy being a monster behind closed doors. You scroll now. You'll never know why I waited 22 years to walk into his lecture hall and deliver the one sentence that turned his $30,000 grant into a permanent criminal record. By the end of this video, you'll see exactly how a single donut and a 20-year-old email chain can turn a self-proclaimed genius into a ghost. There are moments that feel specifically designed for you, like someone rearranged the furniture of the universe, pulled up a chair, and said, "Go ahead. Watch this." I was standing at the front of a lecture hall at a major research university. 250 students in the seats, undergrads, graduate students, a row of faculty in the back with their arms crossed and their coffee going cold. I had just finished a lecture on science communication, on how to translate complex, specialized research into language that real human beings can actually understand and use. The kind of work that requires genuine intelligence, genuine curiosity, and a deep belief that knowledge belongs to everyone, not just the people credentialed to gatekeep it. The kind of work that, 22 years ago, someone told me I was too intellectually limited to appreciate. I was working the room after the lecture, moving between small groups of students, when I heard a voice behind me say my name. I turned around, and I felt absolutely nothing shift in my face. Not a muscle, not a breath, just stillness, the kind that took 2 decades to build. He was standing there, in that lecture hall, looking at me like he expected something, like he had imagined this moment and written himself a better part in it. But to understand how we got here, I need to take you back to where this all started. This story, as originally shared in an online community, is told entirely from one person's perspective. That perspective is mine. I met Marcus in my early 20s through mutual friends. He was a few years older, already enrolled in a doctoral program in the animal sciences, already moving through the world with the specific brand of confidence that comes from being genuinely smart and knowing it. He explained things, complicated things, field-specific things in a way that made you feel like you were being led into something exclusive, like he was doing you a favor by talking to you at all. I fell for it, hard, and honestly, for a while. I do not even regret it, because before I knew who he really was, Marcus was genuinely compelling company. He was warm with his family, easy with strangers. His siblings were some of the best people I had ever met, and I became close with all of them almost immediately, faster than I became close to him. There was also a woman I came to know through him, I'll call her Carol, who was married to his faculty advisor and worked in university administration. Sharp woman, principled. She and I had lunch together on the weekends I drove up to visit. I trusted her almost from the first conversation. That trust, it turns out, was the most valuable thing I built during those 3 years. Here is the thing though. Looking back now, from where I am standing, I can see the tells I missed. The way Marcus had to be the authority in every room. The way he talked about his graduate school peers with a low-grade dismissiveness that sounded like objectivity but was really just contempt. The way he took compliments in hungrily like he needed them to function. I missed all of it, because when you are young and you are in love with someone brilliant, it is dangerously easy to mistake arrogance for depth. Now, stay with me here, because this next part is important. His rental house was always full of animals. He ran a breeding operation out of it as part of his research work, and there were cages, tanks, documentation stacked on every surface. I spent nearly every weekend in that house for 3 years. I was curious about everything he worked with. I asked questions, and I remembered the answers. I paid attention to the permits he filed, the ones he complained about, and the ones he refused to file entirely, calling federal documentation requirements. And I quote, "The government being in my business." I remembered all of it, every single detail. I did not know yet why that mattered. I would doubt about 2 years in. I was there on a Saturday night. I had driven close to 100 miles that day, and Marcus told me, completely calm, completely unbothered, that he was concerned I had been gaining weight and it was affecting his attraction to me. Not my health, not any care for how I was doing. Just a performance review, delivered past midnight, by a man who had just accepted every benefit of my company and my trust. I want you to really picture this moment. I sat up. I looked directly at him. And I said, very quietly, so what is your plan for addressing that? Because I am not changing anything. He stared at me. He did not have an answer. I got dressed, went to sleep, drove home the next morning without another word. 3 months later, he ended the relationship. His stated reason, and I am genuinely not joking, was that I did not know enough about science. That the intellectual gap between us had become too much. That he needed someone he could have real conversations with. I told him that was not the real reason. He insisted it was. He came by about a month later to return some things. And I pushed until he broke. He finally admitted he had been seeing one of his undergraduate students, a 19-year-old currently enrolled in his class while he was her teaching assistant. He was 26. He was her teacher. He had been seeing her while I drove 2 hours every weekend and cooked in his kitchen and became friends with his entire family. The way comments snapped into focus like a key finding its lock. He had been trying to make me break up with him. He wanted the exit ramp with no emotional toll to pay. He wanted to be the one who got left so he would not have to feel like the one who left. The audacity of that, by the way, still genuinely impresses me. I told him to get out. I watched him leave. And somewhere between the door closing and the sound of his car pulling away, something very quiet and very cold settled into place inside me. Because here's what he did not understand yet. I had been paying attention to the wrong things in that house for 3 years. The permit he refused to file. The cage in the backyard. The tank by the window. I had not taken the photographs yet, but I knew exactly where to point the camera. I want to be honest about something. Because this is the part people usually skip over, and I think it matters. For about 2 days after he left, I thought seriously about doing nothing. He was not worth my time. I had my own life waiting. I was 23 years old, and the world was genuinely open in front of me, and burning energy on Marcus felt like a waste of something I needed for myself. And then I thought about her. 19 years old, sitting in his classroom. Not fully understanding the position she was being placed in, whether she realized it or not. Not knowing what it meant to be chosen by your teacher when your teacher has already decided you are something other than a student. I picked the phone back up. George was Marcus's roommate. A genuinely decent guy. One of those people you meet and immediately trust. And he had already told me he and their other roommate had been quietly furious at Marcus for months. They had actually been the ones to pressure Marcus into telling me the truth in the first place. George offered to help me get some personal items I had left at the house. Suggested I come up for the weekend while Marcus was occupied elsewhere. I want you to really picture what I walked back into that house to get, not my clothes. Not the books stacked on his shelf. I walked through every room, and I took photographs. Methodical, completely calm photographs. I documented the breeding conditions. I photographed the animal he was housing without the proper federal permit, the one he had called government overreach. I photographed the animal that had no legal right to be in that state under almost any circumstances. Sitting in a tank, right next to a window, perfectly visible from outside. Real talk, 3 years of weekend visits. 3 years of asking questions and listening and actually caring about what he did, and he had dismissed all of it as intellectual inadequacy. What he had actually been doing was educating the person who was about to dismantle him. That night, George took me out. We hit every bar where people from Marcus's program spent their time. And we told the story of the timeline, the student, the way it all happened to everyone who would listen. The program was small. Word moved fast. By the time we stumbled back in at midnight, Marcus and his new girlfriend were on the couch together, and I walked past them in a short dress with my hair a mess and did not break stride. Marcus said something ugly to me on my way to the kitchen. I poured a glass of water, ate a donut very slowly, said have a great life with what I am leaving behind, and walked out the next morning without looking back. The performance, not the revenge. I want to be completely clear about that. Hey, before we go any further. If this story is landing the way I think it is, a subscribe genuinely means everything on a channel this size. Okay, back to it because it is about to get so much worse. I had my photographs. I called the State Fish and Wildlife Office and asked very politely, how one would go about filing a formal report regarding illegally housed protected animals at a residential address. I filed the report. I sent everything I had. George and the other roommates submitted formal complaints to the university, a teaching assistant conducting a romantic relationship with a currently enrolled student. Then I called Carol. She already knew about the breakup. She did not yet know the real reason. I told her everything. I also told her that Marcus had been careless enough to put some of it in writing. He had actually sent me emails after the breakup explaining his feelings for the student, justifying himself, the way people do when they still think they are the protagonist of the story. I forwarded every email to Carol while she was still on the phone with me. She went quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I will make sure this is handled properly." I knew what that meant. Her husband was Marcus's direct faculty advisor. Carol understood exactly which filing cabinet this information needed to reach. And get this, I almost stopped. Right around this point, about a week into everything I had set in motion, I sat in my apartment one evening and genuinely wondered if I had crossed a line. If I was becoming something I would not recognize. If the person who drove 2 hours every weekend because she was in love deserved to win more than the person I was becoming in the quiet. Then I thought about the grant. Marcus had just received a significant federal research grant, a serious one, through an environmental agency. And I made one more call. I asked how one would report that a federally funded researcher was currently under investigation for the illegal possession of protected species. They were very helpful. Every piece was in place. I did not warn him. I did not reach out. I did not let him see a single inch of what was coming. There is a particular kind of patience that only becomes available to you after someone has completely underestimated your intelligence. I had that kind of patience. And I had nothing left to lose except the version of myself he had tried to make me believe I was. The trap was set. Every door locked from the outside. All I had to do was wait for him to walk into the room. The call from George came on a Tuesday. He could barely stay on the line. He was so delighted. State wildlife officials had shown up at the house with documentation. They had been given specific information about where to look, including the back window where the most serious problem was clearly visible from outside. Since George was on the lease, he let them in voluntarily. He opened his room immediately. The other roommate did the same. They were both cleared within an hour. Marcus's room was a different story. The officials stayed for hours. They came back with a warrant. Every animal Marcus kept to the breeding operation, the protected species, the animal that had no business being in that state under any circumstances, all of it was removed from the property. The only things left behind were some fish in a tank. George told me Marcus's girlfriend had panicked when she could not reach him. She had gotten in her car and driven across town to find him in person. No cell phones yet. No way to warn him. Just a young woman driving through the afternoon trying to reach someone who was already too late to be reached. I still think about that drive sometimes. Not with satisfaction. With something closer to clarity. Now, here is the part that changed everything financially. Marcus had just received a significant federal research grant, and I had asked the right agency the right question about what happens to federal funding when the recipient is under investigation for the illegal possession of protected species. The answer was fast, and it was final. The grant was pulled. What had already been spent had to be repaid, close to $30,000. And because of the nature of the investigation, Marcus would never be eligible for that category of federal funding again. Not a demotion, a ceiling, installed permanently over a career in the sciences. For a doctoral student, that is not a setback you recover from. That is an entire future quietly closing its doors. He avoided criminal charges because every animal was in good health. But he paid a significant fine. He lost his scholarship. He was removed from his teaching position for the relationship with the student. He left the program without the doctorate he had spent years building toward. His father paid for one additional year of coursework so he could at least leave with a master's degree. I did not celebrate. I went home. I built my own life. I got my own graduate degree. My specialty, and I want you to really sit with this, became helping scientists, researchers, and medical professionals communicate their work to general audiences, to people who do not know all the field-specific terminology, To people who were told, once, by someone who should have known better, that they were simply not smart enough to keep up. I work with everyone from small-town clinics to pharmaceutical companies to federal agencies to film producers. I speak at universities. I travel constantly. I get paid extremely well to do the things someone once called my intellectual limitation. I stayed close with Marcus's siblings. We built a real friendship, completely independent of him, over email and then over the years. I sent wedding gifts. I had lunch. I stayed. Marcus apparently complained about this loudly at a family event once, as said his siblings had never warmed to his wife the way they had to his ex. His sister looked at him across the table and said she does not make a habit of befriending people who blow up other people's relationships. That is how his parents found out the real story. 10 years after the fact, he never once found out I was behind any of it. This is the part I still think about. Fast forward to a few weeks ago. That lecture hall. 250 people in the room, and Marcus was in the third row. He came up to me afterward, genuinely incredulous that I had not immediately recognized him. I let him stand there for a moment, watching his face do the work of processing that. Then I said, "Go, I think I just blocked you out entirely." Smiled politely. Moved on. At dinner with the faculty who had invited me to speak, one of them mentioned he had been interviewing for a teaching position all week, and they were likely going to hire him. I scoffed before I could stop myself. When they looked at me, I told them exactly what I knew, that he had left his doctoral program under serious circumstances, that he had been removed from a teaching position for an inappropriate relationship with a student he was responsible for, that he had left without the degree he came for. 3 of them looked at each other in the way people do when they realize they have a problem they did not know existed until 30 seconds ago. The call from Carol came this past weekend. Retired now, still sharp, still exactly the woman I trusted at that lunch table 22 years ago. A former colleague had reached out to let her know a background check had been initiated on Marcus at that university. When they pulled his file from his original institution, everything was still there, perfectly intact, perfectly preserved. The complaint letters, the record of his firing, the documentation from the investigation, a legal record his family had paid significant money to have reduced after the charges were lowered and the fines were paid. Reduced is not removed. When the right institution pulls the right file, every door they thought was closed forever swings back open. I do not think Marcus is going to get that job. And here is what I know, standing on this side of 22 years. The best revenge is not the kind you perform. It is the kind that is simply, factually true. I never lied about a single thing. I reported what was real. I told what I knew. I let the facts exist, out loud in every room where they needed to be heard, because the truth does not have an expiration date. It does not care how much time has passed or how many times someone has managed to outrun it. It just waits, quietly, for the right room. And some people, no matter how far they travel from who they chose to be, never actually get away from it.